to keep your microphones on mute just to eliminate any background noise. We would like to hold questions till the end, just to make sure we have enough time to get through all the planned materials. So if you have a question, just make a note of that and write it off to the side and then hop on your mic at the end to ask. Or if you're not comfortable asking via voice or camera, feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go, and I'll keep an eye on that. And then I'll make sure all those questions are brought up at the end. As I mentioned in our webinar email invitation, lunch is on us today. We can't bring you here just yet, but we will send out a gift card to everyone, all of our customers who have attended. So if you are logged in under a profile that is not obvious that it's you, if you could just also in the chat drop in your name and email address. I think it looks kind of like everyone here. I can tell who you are, but just in case, if you're using a different profile, just let me know who you are. And then also as a special treat, we will do a raffle at the end of the presentation. So if you can stick around to the end, please do so. My last item is always just a shameless marketing plug. Make sure you follow IPS on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn to stay on top of, new technology, safety matters, tips and tricks, and then just some fun stuff that we do here around our office. And now that I have all of that out of the way, I'd like to introduce from Hanwha, Brandon Wilson, Kyle Finnefrock, and Tara Randolph. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. All right. So as Taylor said, my name is Brandon Wilson. I am the regional sales manager for Hanwha in Ohio. We also have Kyle Finnefrock and Tara Randolph on as well. So they may chime in at any point just to kind of add to anything that I'm discussing. But the purpose of today's presentation, hosted by IPS, thank you once again to IPS. But the purpose of this presentation is to really give you all a better understanding of who Hanwha is and what some of the products are that we have to offer. Now, you'll notice that I'm going to give a very surface level description of a lot of different topics here. So I'm not going to dive too deep into details and into the weeds on the products. But if there is anything in specific that you are interested in learning more about, and maybe I don't cover it in depth enough for you, we'd be happy to set up a follow-up call to discuss that, or maybe even discuss your specific application. So without further ado, the screen that you're looking at, this is our virtual experience center. Now, this is actually something that Hanwha had set up as a physical booth at our headquarters in New Jersey. But of course, because of the pandemic that we're in right now, we can't have anybody out there. So we're bringing it to you virtually. So I'll start out by going to the beginning of the booth. We'll go to Hanwha. So who is Hanwha? Now, I just got a text message right before we started this from IPS's own Justin Pickett asking me to tell everybody how to pronounce Hanwha properly. So as you know, I've said it a couple times, it's Hanwha. Some people call it Hanwha. It's sort of potato, whatever you want to call it. It's really up to you. It doesn't bother me, but the proper pronunciation is Hanwha. Now, Hanwha's a huge company, so we're listed on the global Fortune 500. According to the slide here, we're ranked 261st. So we're one of the largest companies in the world. Our world headquarters is based out of South Korea. Now, the other companies that are right up there in South Korea, as far as the largest companies in that country, are all household names to you and me. It's companies like Kia Motors, it's Samsung, it's Hyundai Motors, and then there's Hanwha right there. So because we're not a business to consumer company, we're not that household name, but that doesn't mean that we're not a big company. We're, like I said, we're a huge company. We're listed on the global Fortune 500, but we've been around since 1952. So Hanwha really started as a defense contractor making military grade equipment. So That's the likes of tanks, of rockets, of grenades, all this really cool military stuff. Over the years, as Hanwha has matured, we're still making those products, but we're also getting into a lot of different sectors. So as you can see on the right side of your screen here, we're in aerospace, chemicals, construction. We even get into financial services. We have hotels in other countries. And then another large piece of our business is solar energy. So we're actually making solar panels as well to power our own facilities. And of course, what we're here for today is the video surveillance side of the business. So you'll notice I'm skipping over a couple slides. I'm just going to talk about the important stuff today. But like I said, if there's anything you want more information on, we'd be happy to set up another call to go over that. Now, Hanwha manufactures their equipment in 2 countries, where we have a large manufacturing facility in Vietnam, and then also in South Korea as well. Now, these are Hanwha facilities, so we're not manufacturing in other companies' facilities, and we're making all the components of our own equipment. So what I mean by that, there's a lot of manufacturers out there that aren't actually true camera manufacturers. They're not making all of the components that go into their equipment. They're taking components from other companies, sourcing them, and then assembling them and calling themselves a manufacturer. That's not Hanwha. So in our facilities, we're doing everything from cutting the glass on our lenses, we're creating the housings, we're making the chipsets in our own cameras. So we control that entire supply chain. And it's coming out of these 2 countries, South Korea and Vietnam. Now, the reason I bring this up is because of a law that went into place a couple years ago called the National Defense Authorization Act. And so really what the NDAA is this is the United States attempt to essentially eliminate a large threat that is China when it comes to cybersecurity issues involving video surveillance equipment. So the NDAA explicitly says that no Chinese manufactured product can be sold and installed in a federal government facility. Now, that's the first part of it. They also take it a step further and say that if your business does work with the federal government, you're not allowed to use Chinese manufactured equipment, video surveillance equipment. So if you are an end user and you have a government contract for, let's just say, janitorial services at their federal government buildings, you can't have I almost said the word, you can't have Chinese manufactured equipment inside of your own janitorial service facility. Or if you're an installer of video surveillance equipment, even if you're installing Hanwha cameras, which are NDAA compliant at a federal government facility, you can't also turn around and sell Chinese manufactured equipment at other facilities, at your local bowling alley, because that would be deemed using Chinese manufactured equipment. So long story short, I just want to let everybody know that Hanwha is NDAA compliant, so there is nothing to worry about as far as our equipment being involved with China as far as components go or manufacturing goes. Next piece I'm going to talk about is cybersecurity. And the reason I want to discuss this is because it's extremely important to Hanwha. And what I mean by that is if Hanwha is releasing a product, you know it has been through a lot as far as cybersecurity goes. It's been stringently tested by many different people, many different organizations. Mute that real quick. So with our Wisenet cameras, and I'll talk about Wisenet in a second, those of you that may be somewhat familiar with Hanwha, maybe you have Hanwha cameras, you might realize that the cameras don't actually say Hanwha on them, they say Wisenet. I'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as cybersecurity goes, our Wisenet 7 cameras are all secure by default. So going back to the manufacturing side of things, I mentioned we really control that entire supply chain. We make all the components, we control the whole manufacturing process with our cameras. So that being said, we're allowed to make sure all of those components are secure that are going into our devices. I'll tell you a story real quick. Some of you may already know about this, but I think it was about 5 years ago now. There's a large company called Cisco. Everybody's probably familiar with them. They had another company making components for their switches. So they weren't controlling that entire supply chain of their own switches. And there was a large hack that had happened with their switches, a large so-called backdoor into them, because the company that they were sourcing that component from actually had a backdoor in that component that went into the Cisco switch. So not necessarily Cisco's component that got hacked, but it's another company that was making that and going into Cisco switches. So I can't stress enough how important it is that Hanwha really controls that entire supply chain into their products, allowing us to be secure by default in these cameras. The next key element that I will explain here is UL cap. Now, everybody's heard of UL. UL's a third-party company that has all kinds of different certifications in different industries, and it's sort of the premier certification in pretty much every industry is hitting that UL certification. So when it comes to securing cybersecurity, they have the UL cap certification, and our Wisenet 7 cameras meet this UL cap standard. So to get that certification, to get that standard, there's a lot of stringent testing that goes into that. So if you're an end user and you're out there looking for a new camera system and maybe you're getting multiple quotes, one thing that I would stress that you do ask your representative is whether or not that equipment meets UL cap standards. So that's cybersecurity, and of course I'd be happy to dive deeper into that if you have any questions. But now let's start getting into the fun stuff, the actual cameras themselves. Okay. So Hanwha does a lot of very small things really well in our imagers. And all these small things add up to make a huge difference when you compare a Hanwha camera to any of our competitors. The first thing I'll talk about here is what we're doing with our 4K resolution. So in our Wisenet 7 cameras, Hanwha actually self-developed the f1.2 varifocal lens. So I know what I just said right there is probably mumbo jumbo to a lot of people here, but really the f1.2, it's a very wide aperture in the lens. So because it's that wide, it's able to let a lot of light in and really create that bright 4K image. So you might go to Best Buy or even Costco and see that they're selling a kit that has 8 4K cameras in it for $800, something stupid cheap, right? Well, just because it says 4K on the imager does not mean it's equal to our 4K cameras. There's a lot of different things happening there, and that really wide f-stop, that 1.2 f-stop, is one of those things that really sets us apart. Another one of those things that really makes our imagers impressive compared to a lot of competitors is our low light capability. So when the sun goes down at night, it gets dark out. That's when a lot of video surveillance equipment is truly tested. A lot of incidents happen at night. A lot of crime happens at night. So that's one of the most important times to have those impressive imagers in that nice image. So here in this example, you can see it pretty much speaks for itself here. But what we're able to do is really reduce the noise in the image. So a lot of conventional cameras will have that fuzziness in the image when it's not getting enough light into the lens. We're able to avoid that with our backlit imagers and some of the other nice things that we're doing with our cameras. Now, another huge piece to our success and to our really nice video is our impressive wide dynamic range. And so you can see an example, the result of having good wide dynamic range, but really what it's doing is in a scene or a field of view where you have very bright light and darker areas, wide dynamic range is able to make an adjustment to give you that usable image, that visible or that clear detailed image in both the dark areas and the bright areas. So a conventional camera in this instance where they have the bay door open, that light is just going to pretty much blow away that image. You're not going to be able to see anything. So with our extreme wide dynamic range, we're able to compensate for that. It allows you to see outside as well as inside and get detail on both. So those are just a few of the key things that we're doing with our imagers and our lenses. Now I'm going to get into some of the fun stuff as far as specialty cameras, specialty technologies, and I'll start with multi-sensors. So one thing that's getting a lot more popular in our industry is multi-sensor cameras. So for years and years and years, it was only ever one lens in a camera. Well, if you needed to cover a wide area, you're putting multiple cameras up, maybe right next to each other to cover a specific area. Well, now we can put multiple lenses in a single camera to accomplish that. And you can see here on this chart, we have a camera that has 2 lenses. We have 3 lenses built into a camera. We have a few different models that have 4 built in, and a couple other ones that I'll discuss here too. Let's hop into the dual sensor. So that's the camera itself. It's one housing, 2 lenses in there. We have the option of 2 megapixel resolution or 5 megapixel if you want a little bit more detail. And you can see on the right side of the screen a few of the use cases for this. The first one up top, you can see we have an elevator. So we have one lens looking at the elevator, the other lens looking just at the general area around the elevator. It's great for hallways. So you can see this is a corner of a hallway looking down each end, but you could even put this smack dab in the middle of a long hallway looking both directions. And you can see the stairwell example is another great one. And then similar to the elevator, we have the escalator. So the lens looking at the escalator, people getting on and off of it, and then the other lens pointed at the general area. So it's a pretty dynamic camera. We can use it in a lot of different applications. We'll back up and go to the 3 lens camera. So of course the difference here is that we have 3 lenses in the camera instead of 2. So we added an additional one. This camera is capable of covering up to 320 degrees. But what's nice about it is that we can actually use different lenses. So we can use lenses that have more of a zoom, or we can use wider lenses to accomplish our specific need. Now, if we're using it in a hallway, you can see over here on the right side, we can look down a hallway intersection, so 3 different directions. We can use it in just a big wide open area. If it's just a big room and we need 3 lenses to cover it, we can do so there. And this can even be used on the corner of a building too, to give you a 270 view around a building. And quad sensor. So quad meaning 4. You can see a video here inside of a warehouse. Basically just have that camera set up in the middle, looking 4 different directions, giving you full coverage there. And like I said earlier, this is one camera, so we don't have to run multiple cables to it. It's just a single cable pull. It's one cable. So really you're saving on labor by going with this type of technology. And this can be fully customized. You don't have to have those each covering a single quadrant. We can look in really whatever direction we want. So here, this is one of my favorites. You can see lens 1 looking out this way, lens 3, lens 4, but then they take lens 2 and they point it straight down underneath the camera to eliminate that blind spot there. And here's another example, just in an intersection here, looking all 4 directions. All right, now popping over here to the quad sensor plus the PTZ. So this one's very similar to the one I just showed you, the quad sensor, but we have an integrated PTZ camera underneath it. And what I mean by PTZ, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a pan, tilt, zoom camera. So up top in this spaceship looking camera, we have our 4 fixed lenses, our 4 single lenses. Underneath it in that bubble, we have a camera that we can now control. We can move it around. You can see in this video an example of that. Zoom in on people or objects far away. And what's nice about it is we can even do what we call PTZ handover with this. So we can set up some sort of analytic in one of our fixed cameras, and we can, if that analytic gets tripped, like let's say somebody crosses a virtual line, we can tell that PTZ to go look at that exact spot. So you get an idea of who's there, what crossed that line. So pop back out of here. And then the last multi-sensor camera that I'll talk about here is our 180 panoramic. So this one has 4 lenses in it, but instead of coming in as 4 different channels on your recorder, it would come in as 1 panoramic shot. So that would be 1 channel on your device. There's 4 lenses stitching together to create that. And you can see you can really cover a very large area with just a single lens. So in this application, it's great to, of course, look at a parking lot on the side of a building. Or we can look at a road like we have here. And we have this in multiple resolutions. So of course, the higher resolution you go, the more you can digitally zoom in and get details during live view or playback. All right, let's take a walk through our virtual experience center over to the new normal. So of course, we all know we're in a pandemic right now. I'm very hopeful that it's coming to an end soon, but unfortunately, I don't think any of us truly know if we're going to get back to pre-pandemic normal anytime soon. So there are a few technologies here that we can help move businesses closer to normal, or at least help deal with what the new normal is. First one being occupancy monitoring. Now, since the whole pandemic started, I'm sure all of us have walked into a grocery store, some kind of retail establishment, or really any kind of facility that has a limit on how many people are allowed into the facility. So what occupancy monitoring does is it eliminates the need to have an employee standing at the door counting every single person that comes in and out of the facility, telling people to wait when they're at their limit. And this really automates the process. So we can place a monitor near that front door, and with the use of our AI cameras that can do people counting, we can now have that monitor display how many people are in the store, give messaging that says, please come in or please wait because we're at capacity. And what's neat about this is that we can truly customize this for your application. So if there's any type of marketing material you'd want to also throw on it, or you want to customize the message there, we can do that. And really it's fully customizable there. The next new normal device that I'll talk about is our body temperature detection camera. So On the left side here, you can see the actual camera. We have two lenses built into this, one being a thermal lens, one being a visible light lens. Down below, you can see what each of those lenses look like. The thermal lens on the right is specifically going out and looking for heat signatures. So in this thermal application that you see down here, it could be pitch black in that room, or it could be broad daylight. That image that you're looking at right there would look exactly the same regardless, because it's only looking for heat, doesn't care about lighting conditions at all. The visible light, of course, is what we're used to seeing on all of our standard cameras. It's our 2 megapixel 1080p visible light camera. And what we're doing in this specific temperature detection device is that visible light camera is going out and it's doing face detection. So it's got the smarts to know that, hey, there's a face, and then it works in conjunction with the thermal camera, and it tells the thermal camera, hey, here's my face. I need you to give me a temperature reading on that face. So the thermal camera takes the temperature from like the eye, forehead region, and it gives you that information. So a lot of facilities that really want to eliminate the risk of people coming in with a fever or an elevated temperature, they've been using a number of different ways of doing that. So one's a thermometer that I see most commonly, where you're holding it up to the forehead and it has to be within an inch or two of the forehead to get that accurate reading. The problem that we see with that is that it's hard for the attendant to be socially distant from that person when they're getting that temperature reading. So because you have to get it within an inch or two, you're at risk if that person getting their temperature read has some sort of disease or flu, or of course COVID. So with this technology, by implementing the camera, we can now socially distant. We don't have to come in close contact with the person when we're reading their temperature. And of course, unless you live in Texas nowadays, as far as I know, everywhere else, at least in the United States, has to have a mask wherever we go. So if you'd like a camera to essentially be your big brother up there, or your eye in the sky per se, and tell on people when they're not wearing their masks, we can do that with our AI cameras. And our AI cameras are capable of generating any kind of alerts or notifications, whether that's email or push notification to the phone, or to your alarm center, or what have you, that somebody's not wearing a mask. So we can certainly do that. So I'll pop out of the new normal. We'll head over into one of my favorite things that Hanwha is doing right now, and that's artificial intelligence, or AI. So Hanwha has a specific line of cameras now in our P series that is really looking for 4 different types of objects. Now, in the past, if you wanted any type of notification when a person was in a certain area or a vehicle was in a certain area, you would set up a general line crossing or a general box within the field of view. And if something entered that box, generate your alert. Well, the big downside in the industry with that is that it's using just the changing of pixels in your video. So it can be any time the pixels change crossing that line or change within that box, it would generate that alert, which caused a lot of false alarms. And those false alarms could have been generated by bugs flying around the camera, or lighting conditions changing, maybe headlights on a car, or a raccoon or a deer, animals. There's a lot of different things that were going into those false alarms. So what Hanwha has done here is we're eliminating those false alarms by only looking for human bodies, faces, vehicles, or license plates. So those 4 objects are all we're concerned about with this AI camera. So now if you want that accurate notification when a car pulls in your driveway, or a person is standing on your front porch, or of course in a business situation, if a person is entering an a restricted room where they're not supposed to be, we can now get those accurate notifications without worrying about the false alarms happening. Now, that's the first part of the AI camera. The second part, and what's taking it to the next level and making it a really impressive piece of technology, is that it is giving attributes on those people, faces, or vehicles. Of course, in this little graphic here on the left side, you can see when it detects a human body, it's going to tell you whether or not they're wearing glasses, what color clothing they're wearing, whether or not they're carrying a bag. It'll tell you whether or not they're wearing a hat. So this is all metadata that is now searchable through our video management software. So the other cool thing this camera is doing is when it detects that object, it's doing what we call best shot. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see those thumbnails. The camera's taking essentially a picture of that person and allowing you to see it more blown up. So if you're looking at your thumbnails on the left side, you see something that is interesting to you. Maybe it's a wanted person or vehicle or what have you. You can then click on it and pull back the video of that person or vehicle. And you can see here it's putting a bounding box around every person, every face, and every vehicle that are in the field of view of that camera. So this AI camera is also able to do some business intelligence type information. So we talked about people counting with our occupancy monitoring previously. So this camera, of course, can do that and tie into the monitor so that you don't need the attendant standing at the door counting the people coming into the facility. But what we can also do is queue management. So think about this for, let's say, a grocery store or a hardware store. I have a Menards right down the road from me, and I'm remodeling my house right now. So I'm in Menards just about every other day. So I know that if I get in there and the lines start building up at the cash registers, they need to open up another cash register because I'm getting annoyed. I'm standing, waiting in line for 5-10 minutes, waiting to get out of the place, trying to give them my money, right? So in this situation, if they had a queue camera, you could simply put this up looking at the lines that get generated at each cash register, and they can go into the parameters of it and say, if 3 people get in this line, give me that notification. So then maybe the store manager gets that notification, gets on the PA system, says, hey, we need to open up another register. So an employee goes up to the front, opens up another register, eliminates the line and the wait for the customers. All right.
Hey,
yep.
Brandon, quick question. I'm really fascinated by that last couple of slides because you're really talking about video creating an ROI and running your business better or different. Can you just repeat? Maybe you said it. So how do alerts come out? Is that something that people can get via text or email? Do they have to be in front of their PC? Could you maybe just elaborate on that kind of notification side of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a number of different things we can do, and directly from the camera we can generate an email. We can have it send or create an event to a specific VMS, whether that's Genetec, Milestone, or even Hanwha's own Wave VMS. We have alarm outputs off of that camera, so we can essentially, with the dry contact alarm output, take that to anything, basically. So there's a lot of different things you can do with it, and we can really get customized with it. But if there's anything specific that you had in mind, we can certainly discuss it and talk about whether or not it's feasible.
And it sounds like you know, I could have 100 cameras that are 5 years old, but if I add one of these, I can still use the AI. I put it up in the right place. It can be a relatively minor investment rather than a big CapEx, you know, project and things of that nature. I guess, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So the artificial intelligence, the analytics, the smarts that are happening here are all on the edge. They're based in that camera alone. So so yeah, you don't have to completely redo your entire infrastructure, your entire backend, replace all your cameras. It happens at the camera level. So a single camera can do this analytic by itself. Now, that being said, depending on what you're using as far as the software goes, might give you either more or less access to those analytics and to those results of the AI camera. So if we would recommend using it with one of the VMSs that are compatible with that camera. But if you didn't have a VMS that's compatible, you could always log directly into the camera and access the analytics that way through the web page.
All right, great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Head back home. All right. So I really covered a lot of the exciting things that Hanwha is doing right now, some of the specialty cameras. And it looks like I went a little faster than I had planned to. So I guess we can open it up for questions now, unless Kyle or Tara have anything else that they want to add. But yeah, so yeah, we have plenty of time. If we want to answer questions, I'd be happy to get into that now.
Brandon, we had a couple of questions coming through the chat. Chad from your team stepped in and did answer a couple, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask them just for the benefit of everyone in case they didn't see those. Sure. So the first question was for the temperature detection camera. Is the info gathered able to be stored or integrated into a database to keep daily employee temperature records? Is this extra software? And Chad replied not at this time and not sure if that will ever be a feature as you're not identifying individuals, rather only detecting the temperature of those individuals. And then another question related to the temperature detection. Can an elevated temperature detection then trigger a relay or something to lock down a door or deny door access?
Yeah, so just to start with that first one that Chad had answered, this camera is not doing facial recognition. So it's not able, because it's doing face detection, it's able to say, hey, there's a face there, but it's not able to say, hey, that's Chad Paris's face. It just says that's a face. So we're not able to combine that temperature with a person's name to store that on file. And a big reason that we're not doing that is because there's a lot of uncertainty as far as what the HIPAA rights are around this technology. And so we certainly don't want to have anybody violate those rights.
Perfect. And then Larry has asked for the multi-sensor. Are they over a single Cat 5.6 or do you need several runs?
Yes. So with the multi-sensor cameras, every single one of these cameras would be a single Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable. So it's some of them would require more power than your standard PoE. It'd just be PoE plus, so we could use a PoE injector to power them. But the big advantage to it is that it is just that one cable run. So the technician on site, the installer, doesn't have to run multiple cables, doesn't have to hang up multiple cameras. It's just one camera, one cable run. And that's where our big advantage is by saving on labor.
Perfect. Are there any other questions? I think I've caught everything in the chat. If anyone has anything that they want to drop in there, or if you want to hop on your mic and ask. I guess a question that I would have is, did any of you, while listening to this, did anyone have kind of like an aha moment where you thought, oh, what Brandon just talked about, that would fix XYZ problem for us. Did any of you have any kind of that experience today? It's fine if you're shy.
That's okay. Hey, Brandon Taylor, thanks. Back on the temperature detection camera from a sort of a single use point. In other words, we can install those cameras and pull it back to it looks like a laptop or something. No NVR is needed or for just simple temperature detection. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and we can take that directly to a monitor with an HDMI out of that camera, or we can, like you said, we can take it to a laptop. You have multiple options there, and if you wanted to take it to an NVR, you could. It would take up 2 channels. You'd have your thermal channel as well as your visible light channel, but we do have multiple options there, right?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last call for questions. Final thoughts from anybody before we close? Tim Kirstein, did you have something?
Yeah, real quick. Thanks, Taylor. I'm Tim Kirstein, the general manager of the Cincinnati branch, and just wanted to thank you all for coming out today, spending some time with us. I hope that you think it was beneficial for you. I know that Brandon laid a lot of information on you, but that's kind of why we were doing this. Hopefully you can tell now that, you know, video surveillance is much more intricate than just going online and buying a bunch of cameras off of Amazon and slapping them up around your building. Every situation has its own unique requirements, and not every camera is going to work well in every application. So that's kind of where we come in. It's our role to work with our partners. We partner up with most of the industry-leading camera manufacturers, such as Hanwha, and our team of salespeople, engineers, technicians. We work with these guys and receive ongoing training from the manufacturers. So we know what's out there. We know what cameras work best in what applications, and we can provide multiple options for you, you know, while keeping your budget in mind too. So we're not going to bankrupt you, try to sell you all the most expensive cameras. We're here to make the best fit for you. So whenever you do need anything under your video surveillance needs, just reach out. We'll be glad to come out, walk through, take a look at the actual application, and give you some ideas and suggestions. So again, thanks again for your time. Hopefully this was helpful. And Taylor, you can go ahead and wrap it up.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for attending, taking time out of your morning. I hope you found it time well spent. Before we close here, I'm just going to draw a name for our raffle. Give the box a good shake. And I've got Andy C. Andy C. Are you still on the call? I see his name. So you are a winner of our raffle for our gift card. And then again, for everyone who attended, I will be reaching out to you to get you a gift card for your lunch as well. So that's it for us today. If you have any questions, you'll be getting an email from me. So if you think of something when you're reflecting on the material, just feel free to reach out to me. And if I don't know the answer, I will ask one of the experts and get you what you need. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.